Hello, we are continuing to talk about the Cold War and specifically how the Cold War expands. We are still in the textbook. It is still available in the National Emergency Archives of the National Emergency Library. And we're going to talk about literally the Cold War going global right now. So, Stalin's death eases tensions. On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin died, setting off a short power struggle. Nikita Khrushchev soon emerged as the new head of the Soviet Union. Although a communist and a determined opponent of the United States, Khrushchev was not as suspicious or cruel as Stalin. He condemned the excesses of the Stalin regime and inched toward a more peaceful relationship with the democratic West. In July of 1955, Khrushchev met with Eisenhower at a conference in Geneva, Switzerland. Although the meeting yielded few significant results, it did seem to be a small move toward peaceful coexistence of the two powers. Unrest explodes behind the Iron Curtain. American talk of rolling back communist borders and Khrushchev's talk of peaceful coexistence were taken seriously by people in Soviet-dominated countries behind the Iron Curtain. People in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia resented the control exerted by the Soviet Union. Many hungered for more political and economic freedom. In 1956, two uprisings shook Eastern Europe. First, workers in Poland rioted against Soviet rule and won greater control of their government. Since the Polish government did not attempt to leave the Warsaw Pact, Soviet leaders permitted these actions. Then, encouraged by Khrushchev's words and Poland's example, Hungarian students and workers organized huge demonstrations. They demanded that pro-Soviet Hungarian officials be replaced, that Soviet troops be withdrawn, and that non-communist political parties be organized. Khrushchev responded brutally, sending Soviet soldiers and tanks to crush the Hungarian Revolution. The Soviets executed many of the revolution's leaders, killed hundreds of other Hungarians, and restored hardline communists to power. Americans could only watch these events in horror. Eisenhower's massive retaliation approach was powerless. The United States would not use nuclear weapons or any other weapons to guarantee Hungarian independence from the Soviet Union. The Hungarian revolt added a new level of hostility to international relations. At the 1956 Olympic Games, held that November in Melbourne, Australia, the bitter feelings surfaced. A water polo match between the Soviet Union and Hungary turned violent. Sports writers called it the blood in the water match. The U.S. diffuses the Suez Crisis. The United States found itself involved in another world conflict, this time in the Middle East. As Cold War tensions increased, Egypt's president Gamal Abdel Nasser tried to use the U.S.-Soviet rivalry to his advantage. Nasser wanted to construct a dam on the Nile River at Aswan. The United States and Britain initially offered to fund the project, but when Nasser recognized the People's Republic of China and open talks with the Soviet Union, the Eisenhower administration withdrew its offer. In response, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, placing it under government control. The canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, had originally been managed by a British-French company and was protected by British armed forces. Nasser's action threatened the flow of Middle Eastern oil to Europe. Without consulting with Eisenhower, Britain and France plotted to get the canal back into Western hands. They joined forces with Israel, a young nation that had long suffered from raids along its border with Egypt. Britain and France used the Suez Crisis as an excuse to seize power in the Suez Canal. President Eisenhower was outraged by these actions. Rather than support his Western allies, Eisenhower criticized them and refused to supply them with U.S. oil. The three nations had counted on Eisenhower's support, and when it did not come, they were forced to withdraw their troops from Egypt. Eisenhower promises strong action. In response to Soviet influence in the Middle East and elsewhere, the president made a statement in January of 1957 that became known as the Eisenhower Doctrine. Eisenhower announced that the United States would use force to help any Middle Eastern nation threatened by communism. Eisenhower used his doctrine in 1958 to justify sending troops to Lebanon and to put down a revolt against its pro-American government. The Eisenhower administration also used the Central Intelligence Agency in its struggle against communism. Congress had created the CIA in 1947 as an intelligence gathering organization. Eisenhower gave it a new task. he approved covert or secret CIA operations to protect American interests. In 1953, the CIA aided a coup that installed a new government in Iran. In 1954, it accomplished a similar mission in Guatemala. While both operations helped to build anti-communist leaders, they also created long-term resentment against the United States. The Cold War blasts off into space. Although the United States successfully contained the spread of communism on the ground, it did suffer a setback in outer space. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched a 184-pound steel ball containing a small transmitter into an orbit of Earth. The Soviets named the tiny satellite Sputnik 1. The following month, they launched a much larger satellite. It carried a dog named Laika to see how a living creature would react to life in outer space. Since there was no way to return the satellite to Earth, Laika died in orbit. The launches shocked many Americans who had long believed that the superior technology would keep the United States ahead of the Soviet Union. Would Soviet space technology give them the rocket power to launch missiles into American cities? In a state of crisis, Congress quickly approved the National Defense Education Act, a $1 billion program intended to produce more scientists and teachers of science. The act authorized money for loans to enable high school and college graduates to continue their education in science. In addition, Congress created the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, to coordinate the space-related efforts of American scientists and the military. So, checkpoint. How did the Hungarian and Suez crises of 1956 raise Cold War tensions? And what these two events did was show that the United States was not really willing to get involved in these areas to protect those people. We weren't willing to risk war with the Soviet Union in order to protect people in Britain, France, Egypt. So that just about wraps this up about the Cold War expanding. So like always, stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.